I don't know if you've heard or not, but some people say that there's this sinister force out there in the universe plotting against us. Yeah. And it may be more powerful than God. His name's Satan. Don't tell anybody or tell everybody. I don't know which we're supposed to do, because apparently this fallen angel is so powerful that it can trick God and steal from him, because he's so powerful and eminently defeatable. And wait a minute. So we just have to say a couple words and he goes away, but he's also the most dangerous. I'm starting to think that Satanic Panics are about more than spiritual warfare. They might be a special kind of spiritual warfare that's actually set up to hurt Christians and people of faith rather than stop any dark influences that could actually be affecting people. So let's talk about power struggles and the Satanic Panics today as we walk together down Creation's paths. Hello, everybody. My name is Charlie, and I am a Christopagan Druid and priest of Bridget.
Hello, everyone. My name is Brian. I'm a Christopagan Druid and sous chef to the Dogda.
Today, we're going to be talking about Satanic Panics, what they are, what they really are, and how we can combat them. But before we get into all that, if you haven't already, don't forget to like, subscribe, follow, whatever the terminology happens to be on whatever app you're listening to us on. We work really hard to make sure that we have the best topics in creation, spirituality, Christopaganism, and Christian witchery that we can bring to you here, and you don't want to miss a thing. Plus, we have a book secretly out right now. If you head over to wisdomscry.com, you can find our new book, a primer on creation spirituality there that you can check out and take a look at and tell us what you think about it. And also, if you have any questions about it, we're going to be talking about it more on the podcast. So this is your early access to the book that'll be coming out soon. So definitely go and check that out. All right, let's just get into it now, shall we? Satanic Panics are obnoxious. They happen periodically and sporadically throughout history. I think the first earliest Satanic Panics that we can really pin our fingers on happened probably in about the 6th century, where they were used to great acclaim to finally burn down and destroy the remaining pagan temples. And of course, a bunch of Jewish synagogues and kill a bunch of people in the process. The most famous ones are probably the witch trials that happened to coincide with men going into traditionally female roles, such as brewing beer and delivering babies and medicine. Sure, that's just a coincidence, right? That's just a coincidence that witches brew potions, but doctors make medicine, even though they're at the time using the same ingredients. Yeah, I'm sure that's just a coincidence. Nothing to see here. And of course, the most infamous one for those of us in the United States would be the Salem witch trials, which actually had nothing to do with anything. It was a bunch of bored girls trying to find a way to have a bit of fun at the expense of others. They get co-opted into power grabs and land grabs by the powerful elite. Wait, I'm starting to see a trend here. And then we have the Satanic Panic of the 80s, which was a bunch of people upset that kids weren't following the rules and obeying the existing power structures. So it must be the music. I think it's kind of obvious if you just look at the nature and history and timing of each of the successive Satanic Panics, that what they were really about is power and maintaining the current power structure or enforcing a new one. They happen regularly.
Yeah, that was one of the things I found fascinating when looking into the Salem witch trials. When you start reading through the documents, the writings of the time from those involved, you can really get this feel of all the things going on, the things that they were accusing and murdering people over.
Technically, only a couple of people got murdered. It's not like some of the European witches. But
well, that's the thing that I was getting to. One of them being that lawyer. They wanted his property, and he legally outmaneuvered them. They successfully murdered him, but he legally outmaneuvered them, and they could not steal his property and wealth. And that's what they were mad about.
Yes.
Oh, so much of the writing was they were mad about that. And it's like, wait, if this is really a satanic panic, we're really fighting evil, then why are you mad that you didn't get to take the property of this guy that you just murdered? Like, what really is bothering you? And once again, you think back to the satanic panic around rock and roll. This was a counterculture movement yelling at the authority, those in power and authority, saying, hey, you're doing bad things to society, to the public good. They put out angry music to help vent the frustrations with the injustices going on around them. And suddenly there's this satanic panic about the devil being in the music and causing everybody to all kinds of crazy stuff.
And it's interesting to notice that when the sequel to that satanic panic happened, racism got substituted for Satanism. They, instead of going for it's the devil in rap music, they just went, it's scary black people trying to corrupt the kids. I think that shows the lie there, right? Because all of the objections were brought by the same exact people, but because one was done by a group of white kids and one was done by a group of African-American kids, the motivation behind it changed. I found this very interesting growing up in the evangelical church, that heavy metal was satanic, but rap wasn't. It was just corrupting because of the nature of the people. And that goes to the point of racism. It's making the devil out of the other. It's really important for us to realize that the Hebrew scriptures know nothing of Satan. He does appear a couple times. Maybe he, maybe they, and not they as in a non-binary Satan, but there may have actually been more than one, because the Satan that appears in the scriptures is basically God's rules lawyer. Job doesn't actually love you. It's because you've been so good to him. Who wouldn't love somebody who's been so good to him? If you were really mean, he wouldn't love you. And then God says, I'll take that bet, and you get the rest of the story, right? The idea of Satan really doesn't start congealing until the first century before and after the Common Era. We start getting a concept of Satan. We did an episode about this. I believe it's called The Many Satans, that you can go back and look into. We actually go through a lot of the various Satans that were named in this time period. Medieval Christianity actually had 6 Satans that were named and given various positions of what they were actually the Satan of. This idea has always been a struggle because it's not native to the faith. It seems to have come in with the post-Babylonian exile in the Zoroastrian faith that was practiced at the time, a god of light and a god of darkness. And so the mythology that ends up growing up here is very confusing, because Satan is sometimes stronger than God, sometimes weaker than God, but it kind of oscillates back and forth between the two because it's trying to actually grapple with a foreign belief system that has been incorporated into Judaism and later Christianity. It is a confusing story when you look into the history of the devil.
That was one of the things I found really interesting when looking into the history of it. With my background, I originally wanted to be a prosecuting attorney for a state's attorney's office. I was studying all this stuff and looking into the history of Satan and whatnot. And, I sat back and I was like, this is God's prosecuting attorney, basically. Their entire job is to go out and investigate individuals and then basically putting them on trial, accusing them of failing to meet the standards that they're claiming and challenging them to prove themselves just and righteous and deserving of their position and what they have. That very much was the historical Satan that I ended up finding when going through all that. And it was not this other weird, dark, evil force. It was actually like, as an agent working under God's authority, just there to challenge and question. You claim you're righteous. That's the whole thing with Jesus and Satan and the temptations. You claim you're righteous. Here are the accusations put forward. Here's the evidence put forward. And Jesus then has to defend himself.
And the Gospels themselves are the locus for this because, again, we do not know precisely whether it was the language of the historical Jesus or the writers of the New Testament that came afterwards. But a lot of the ideas that we have of the devil come from the Gospels, where Jesus talks about the devil. He was a liar from the beginning, right? He refers to the devil as the god of this world, the prince of the power of the air. All of those ideas really start coming in there. We don't have good provenance for them, so we don't know where they're coming from. The best guess, I think, is probably from the Enochian tradition, The books of 1st and 2nd Enoch were important to the early Christians. They're actually quoted in the Epistle to Jude. And that seemed to have been important to the idea of Jesus himself, who refers to himself constantly as the Son of Man, which is the prophesied savior figure from 1st Enoch. That's probably where that came from. The church and the state that it has always entwined itself with found this idea so useful that whatever is against the will of powerful gets labeled satanic. It's amazing the things that are and are not satanic. In fact, I think it's Frederick III is hilariously the Antichrist. I think he was declared the Antichrist 3 times by 3 different popes, but also a great hero of the faith by other popes, or sometimes even the same pope in between being the Antichrist. So apparently Antichrist is a hat you can take off and put back on. But anytime he did anything that they didn't like, they just declared him Antichrist, stir up a satanic panic against him. And it didn't really work with him.
When looking at it from that historical lens, one of the patterns that really comes up and repeats often when you see that the underlying grievance, go from this, going from my legal background, this underlying grievance seems to either stem from misogyny. Well, men are supposed to be more powerful. Women have this power. Therefore, satanic, we take it from them. Whether it's power in wealth or power in stature in community, either case, instantly labeled evil, satanic, and then stolen, taken by force. Or it is this we later label as racism, but before that was more of the person outside the clan. That kind of evolved over time, but it is definitely the stranger amongst us type. And then, of course, you have your last grievance. Oh, they're against the state, therefore satanic. And it becomes an easy way to dismiss and to steal their wealth, their power, their authority.
Satanic panics are always about power. And it's valuable to ask yourself when you see one happening, who benefits from this? You will see the opportunists who are easy to identify, putting out messages like, Satan is doing X, Y, and Z, send me money so that I can fight him. The grifter charlatan class is fairly easy to spot. But when you look behind the veil, you start seeing other components. The satanic panic of the 80s was the last gasp of trying to stop the youth revolution that started in the 60s. And I don't just mean like the free love and all of that, but the whole idea of a teenager didn't exist until the 1950s. We had to have the child labor laws come in. We had to have a certain level of prosperity. And of course, the automobile and the radio that found that kids had access to disposable income and no bills. So they became a class that could be exploited. And so we see a very predominant youth culture developing. But when you start developing a separate and distinct youth culture, it starts asserting its own hopes, wishes, and ambitions that may not be aligned with that of the broader culture. And so we see the satanic panics in the 60s because of the embrace of psychedelics and free love and the anti-war movement. I don't think I've ever seen anything as shocking as sermons that were preached at the time that called war sentiment satanic, but they did. Yes, the Prince of Peace really doesn't like you trying to stop unnecessary war. But when you start looking at it from that angle, you start seeing the people whose power has been entrenched through the cultural norms that are being flaunted. And we see the struggle. We see them trying to wrest control back because they know nothing but control. It's my personal belief, which has come from a couple different sources, but it's kind of morphed in my own head, so I don't want to cast the blame on anyone else, that it is my belief that power and being power hungry comes from a raw sense of insecurity and fear. That the way that the most insecure and fearful people get through and past their fear is convincing themselves that they are so strong and vicious and cruel that they are able to keep themselves safe from all the threats, real or imagined. And I don't believe that most people are doing this at a conscious level. I do think that there are some people who are very calculatedly thinking these things, But I remember growing up, and I still see it to this day, numbers being flaunted of by this date, the United States will no longer be a majority white country. And the implication was always, and you should be afraid. Why? Why should I be afraid? I never quite understood that. Most of my friends growing up were non-white individuals, a practical United Nations of friends. So I never quite understood why I should be afraid of somebody who either looks different from me or has a different cultural upbringing than I do. But the implication was always there. And that's the fear of losing power. Remember, equality to somebody who has always had a state of superiority feels like oppression. Because when you've always been able to lord your power and prestige over others just because you exist, not having that feels like a diminishment. And it is a diminishment because no one should be superior to anybody in a democracy, which is why they are now attacking the idea of democracy itself. Christian nationalism is not born out of some idea that Christians should rule or have the right to rule. I remember being in the churches as this was all coming together. I didn't leave the evangelical church until the 90s. And it was always straight up fear. If we don't seize control of the government, if we don't take power, then other people will. And some people would even say the quiet part out loud, and they might treat us like we treated them. To me, that meant, well, maybe we should treat them better now.
Or as they say in the gospel, make peace with your accuser before you're dragged before the judge. Yeah, you're supposed to be following the gospel after all.
Yeah, you'd think the people in the churches, but that's not how that works in this country.
Even to that point, you could really see one of the recent satanic panics over the Lalabu. When you start to distill it down to its constituent parts, I look at it closely, it is that fear of a foreign cultural element that has taken on great popularity in the country right now. A foreign element is teaching the youth acceptance of other cultures, basically, on a subtle level.
Let's break that down real quick. Because Labubus, if you've ever seen one, they're these cute little monsters with grinny, toothy faces. They get the double curse on them because they are a Japanese artist's interpretation of a Celtic monster. So both are foreign ideas that are being mashed up through the imagination of a Japanese artist. And that really is the problem. You can see this growing anxiety about the Asian countries because they are coming into their own. China is getting more powerful. India is getting more powerful. Japan kind of never stopped being powerful, at least in the imagination of the West, and has maintained a lot of its power through technological innovation and production. This idea that our American preeminence in the world could be eclipsed, and I would not say could be, has been eclipsed. Chinese cinema and Bollywood movies far outpace the United States in our cultural output as far as number of people who watch them. The same thing with international sports such as soccer or football and cricket, that just far and away beat any of the American sports. And that loss of preeminence is something that inspires fear in people who don't understand right relationship. They don't understand how we could and should relate to each other from a place that is not, I am going to steal everything that you have.
Then you couple that with the traditional dolls that Americans are supposed to be playing with and reinforce both misogynistic roles and other power dynamics that allow the powerful to stay in control by dividing and conquering, dividing amongst the sexes, dividing amongst the various cultural backgrounds, call it racism. It's all out of the same family, same bucket. You get all that pulled together, and then next thing you know, you have a satanic panic. They're trying to say it's evil because of Satanism, but that's because they're too afraid, or this becomes a great example of that, because the grifters, those that are in power that want to maintain their power, find this fear as a useful tool to maintain it, and the others are just embracing the fear, and it's easier to just attack something than to actually work on making their lives better.
I've seen this popping back up again recently with a lot of people going out of their way to point out you shouldn't let your kids watch Hocus Pocus this spooky season because every time you do, Disney is sending hordes of demons through your screen into your life because Hocus Pocus is so demonically evil. It does have witches in it, but no, I don't think Hocus Pocus is demonic. The real problem is Disney is a for-profit corporation. And what I think a lot of people are not getting about this is for-profit corporations will always follow the money. Disney has been making a lot more inclusive content lately, featuring LGBTQ characters, people of different ethnicities and cultures. And that is frightening to people who want to keep their preeminence. It's not that Disney is doing any of these things out of the kindness of their own hearts or out of any sense of morality. It's actually a sign that the other side is losing the culture war. We're seeing more queer characters and people of various colors on screen because there's money in that. And that's what has to be attacked. You can do it through a fairly innocuous movie like Hocus Pocus, because there are witches in Hocus Pocus. There's even a zombie in Hocus Pocus. So there you go, evil.
And such scary and powerful females that are all powerful, yet children defeat them.
The real thing that people are fighting there in that particular satanic panic is the fact that Disney has learned that there is money making sure more diverse casts fill their content. And you can see this with what recently happened with Jimmy Kimmel. They thought that the money was stacked against them and canceled him. And when they saw that the money was stacked against them for canceling him, they brought him back. There is no morality to what happens at Disney or any other large corporation like that. They will do whatever is financially in their interest, whatever they see as being financially in their interest. That's what they're going to do. But it becomes a very good way to see for these people, some of whom actually understand that, to see that they are losing the culture war. And so maybe if they bully the company enough, they can get propaganda made that will help them win. And when that didn't work, Larry Ellison just started buying CBS, and he's now trying Paramount, Skydance, and is now trying to buy Warner Discovery. Because if we can't bully them into changing what they're doing, well, we can just own them.
And change it.
How
do we inoculate ourselves against these satanic panics and power grabs?
Anytime somebody points at something else and says you should be terrified of that, check into it first and ask yourself who benefits.
See if it's a paper tiger, because oftentimes when you just let them talk on, and that's the fun thing, is you don't have to do anything, but just listen carefully, let them ramble. Because in their rambling, you'll find out often they'll talk about how mighty and terrifyingly powerful it is, and then follow that right up with, it's so weak, the simplest thing can destroy it. Then paper tiger.
Yeah, and you can also just look for basic dishonesty. There were a lot of quote unquote Christian pastors during the pandemic who said that the order to close churches was an antichrist move to destroy Christianity. They closed concerts, movie theater. Christians weren't singled out, like mosques and synagogues and temples and everything else were closed too. You weren't being singled out. That's not what was going on there. And so by just doing that little bit of digging, just a little bit, they obviously aren't just targeting a specific group if it is something that applies to everyone. So who benefits from scaremongering that happens there? The people, the grifters that were upset that they were unable to make the money that they were making prior. Has nothing to do with anything else. And you can see this over and over again. Some people are just trying to satisfy their own insecurities. So they pretend to have knowledge that they do not have. You'll notice when we talk about various science or medical issues, we're very quick to caveat that we are not experts on this. When Brian was talking about legal issues, he talked about when he was studying law, he's not a lawyer, and he made that clear ahead of time so that you weren't thinking that he was saying he was a lawyer. We put those caveats out there. Somebody who does not have that medical background or that legal background may be misinterpreting or misunderstanding the facts that are being presented to them. And they also may just be making things. I see a lot of people nowadays that are very frightened of AI. And I do think that the next satanic panic will be born from an AI scam. But I don't think that's AI's fault. If we're going to stop having these satanic panics, we all have to have a basic level of media literacy. We want answers, and we want answers now because we have given ourselves this lie that we have short attention spans. I don't believe we have short attention spans. What we actually have is an inability to wait.
Yeah.
Anything that makes us feel like we're waiting, that causes just a brief bit of discomfort in us, we flick off and we're on to the next thing. And that's where we get caught in this. When news stories break, all of the bad actors rush out immediately and put forward their lies, because they are lies. If they're not based on truth, they are lies. They may be able to be backed up later, but you don't know. You're just imagining a scenario and passing it off as truth. And we have to stop that from happening.
And in this moment, I almost want to go ahead and use the language hallucinations, because everyone in this growing satanic panic over AI wants to be like, AI hallucinate. No, people hallucinate all the time. That's what a lot of this is people creating stuff out of whole cloth. A guy went and shut up a pizzeria because human hallucinations created a false reality and drove a person to the point of shooting up a pizzeria trying to find a basement that just does not exist.
People gathered in Daily Plaza awaiting the second coming of JFK.
We just went through a whole bunch of people believing in the rapture. Some gave their children to the state. Some gave away all their belongings.
Hallucination is a problem in all of this, because when you don't have perfect data, there's always going to be problems. We got into the Spanish-American War because of a well-crafted hoax that everyone fell for. And we had an entire war and annexed to the Philippines and Puerto Rico and did a lot of very bad things in the Caribbean and out in the Pacific because of it. We did the same thing with Vietnam. The Gulf of Tonkin incident did not happen. And that factual hallucination led people into war. This is a problem that we have had before the machines. And it's the one thing that we need to do if we're going to stop these satanic panics. We have to set aside our initial feelings and look at what is really going on. That is a hard thing to do, because it is the vast majority of people do not want to do it and will not do it. But it's up to the rest of us to try to be that voice of conscience that can steer us back in the right direction.
The voice of reason.
Yes.
Because after all, we are giving ourselves a moment to take control of our natural instincts of fight, flight, or freeze.
And it's really easy to trick people into fight when you freak them out first. It's learning that thing we try to teach kids before and during kindergarten. Just because you want to slap Timmy doesn't mean that you slap Timmy. It's basic impulse control. And it's the one thing that we as a species have proven over and over again that we are just bad at, but that we do have the capacity to do it when we apply ourselves in. So here's to the next satanic panic, and hopefully having the cool heads prevail so that it doesn't actually cause as much problem. I hope that you've enjoyed this episode. I hope that you got something out of it. I'd love to know what you think about it. Let me know down in the comments. I have a lot of feelings about this. There's a lot that we didn't say. If you have any questions, comments, or things that you would like us to follow up on, definitely put that in the comments. That helps us out so much.
If you're listening to us on YouTube, Spotify, or CreationsPaths.com, you can leave a comment right there. If you're listening to us anywhere else, even if they say you can leave a comment, they don't notify us, so we won't know. But you can leave a comment there anyway, because engagement is magic. And then head over to CreationsPaths.com, click on chat, and you can leave a message there, and we will see it, and we will be able to get back to you. While you're there, if you happen to have a few dollars, you can pass our way. We offer monthly and annual memberships. You can also support us on Patreon and Ko-fi. I am CE Dorset on both, and you can support us using the Cash App hashtag CreationsPaths. Thank you to everybody who does that. We are ever so grateful. Thank you so much. You all really do help us keep the lights on, keep a roof over our head, and food on our table. If we've ever said anything that's helped you out, please share it with others. That helps us out more than you know.
Oh, blessed and sweet Immaculate Heart of our Blessed Mother Mary, we ask that we all will be formed in you into the mind of Christ, that contemplates all things and holds all things as you did in your heart, so that whenever we do take action, we are taking right action and not falling to the lies and manipulations that are being arrayed against us so that we cause harm. Bless us and keep us, most blessed Mother, that we will find our way. Amen.
Amen.